under a governor. And what really startled me was not the stupidity of government, because I'm used to seeing that in real time and live action. What startled me was the widespread compliance of businesses and individuals. So sometime around late April, a friend sends me some social media posts from some little unknown coffee shop out of Lexington, Kentucky, that was standing up to the entire Kentucky government and the governor in particular. But what really stood out to me was not that they were standing up to our governor, he who shall not be named, but the way Andrew and Brewed did it with incredible humor. One of the few things that bums me is he made a coffee cup to sell on their website that was called Tyrant's Tears. And they made a coffee blend called Bashir's Tears, I believe. And it was like, what was the tagline for the coffee? It was like a little bit of salt.
And a fruity finish.
And a fruity finish. And it was great because, he went to a strip club. He didn't go into the strip club. And there was a time in Kentucky where you could get a cup of coffee and go into a strip club and get a lap dance. But you could not buy a cup of coffee at Brewed and sit down and drink it. And he would go around the state just showing the stupidity and hypocrisy and inconsistency of our governor in spite of facing constant threats, losing their alcohol license, being drugged into court. And I was like, I want to meet this guy. Like anybody who is willing to be one of, I believe Brewed and Beans were the only two businesses in the entire state of Kentucky to stand up to our governor. And so I am so excited to finally hear from Andrew directly and for you all to learn from him how you can likewise go and fluster government officials through humor and other tactics.
So, one way you guys can tell you're really important to me is I actually wrote a speech for this. So, I've spoken at a number of events over the last 6 or so months, and I typically don't write a speech. I typically just go off the cuff, but I thought, hey, I should maybe write it down, because we do have a pretty complicated story. And the story really starts with the word no. It's an especially heavy word when said to people who are completely not expecting it. And they also have no idea how to respond when you're staring at somebody and you're demanding compliance and they just say, no, I don't want to. Now, I wish I could say I was a very conscientious objector. I wish I could say I'm as BA as some of these other people up here. As awesome, right? Not quite it. I was trying to fly a little bit under the radar. See, in November of 2020, our governor, after he had promised not to close indoor dining again, from back in the spring, closed indoor dining. And he allowed heated patios to stay open. Well, our space in Lexington has a big garage door. I've got a concrete floor. I Googled definition of patio. Sounded a lot like what I had. So I put up a sign on the door and I said, come on in, enjoy our heated patio, come on in and sit down. And I thought, I'm good to go. Karen from the health department disagreed. Her name was Karen. This is not a drug attack. It was literally Karen. And so Karen came in and decided to rain on my parade. And she says, no, sir, sorry, you have to close. The problem was she wasn't talking to me 8 months ago. See, in January of 2020, guys, I am about 28 years old. I graduated from high school. I spent about 3 weeks in college and said, never mind, not for me. My parents convinced me it was at first. I knew better, but it was their money. No, I'm just joking. I had to pay for it. But in January 2020, I'd had a couple of companies. I started my first company a few years earlier with $5,000. And how many people in here own a business? Fantastic. And after years and years and years of not paying myself so I could pay others, of not getting very much sleep, one of my first real successful company was a commercial cleaning company. And I remember there was one point where I wasn't home for 3 days and I would sleep on a roll of paper towels on my office floor because I had to cover cleans because we were struggling to find staff that would show up. And I had faith that it was but a temporary problem. After a few of those years of struggling through it, in January 2020, I was what a lot of people would consider a pretty good success. I was technically a millionaire. I mean, I didn't have $1 million, but, the government didn't look at it that way. I had a different restaurant than Brewed. I had my commercial cleaning company had about 30, 40 employees there. But by November 2020, 2 weeks before the health department came in, I'd been approved for food stamps. I'd had to lay off all my employees. It was just my wife and one other employee that worked on the weekends. And this was our way back. We said, hey, if we just get through this together, we might find our way back. But when the health department came in, see, 90% of your local coffee shops are sit-down business. If they don't have a drive-through, that is how they make their money. And when they came in and said we couldn't have anybody inside anymore, I said, well, I can't survive. See, when they came in, they were hitting a man who was losing his American dream. The American dream is a simple one, but it's the one that attracts people from all around this world to come here, sometimes even when they're not supposed to be. It's a simple dream that you can finish better than you started, and you can build a better life for your kids and for your grandkids. Knowing the financial place we were in because of government regulation, knowing that all the time my family, my son had missed out, I couldn't just give it up. Say, sorry, I just couldn't fight for it. So the question became when they came in, not how far was I willing to go, but how far were they willing to go to take it from me? See, this is why I don't write things down. I get lost. So Karen comes in and says, Andrew, you need to close. She didn't know my name, but she said, you need to close. I said, geez, no, I'm not feeling that. I'm not going to do that. She didn't know what to do. She left. She called her manager. She came back in. She goes, listen, if you just close the indoor dining, we'll just kill it here. We'll act like it never happened. I was like, it would have happened to me, so no, I'm going to stay open. She rolled out that nice little line. Listen, I'm just trying to do my job. You know what? I'm just trying to do mine, which is serve a cup of coffee. Like, I'm really confused here. The only difference is I sort of kind of directly pay you through my licensing fees, but whatever. So she left. She called up the big guns. The big manager shows up. A guy by the name of Skip. Skip Castleman was his name. I don't know what his real name is, but he went by Skip. Skip came in and he said, you need to close. Now at this point, I realized very quickly, as John had said earlier, if you stand alone, if you stand quietly, you will be crushed. So I sent out the messages there on the Facebooks. I sent out the messages into groups. I posted one photo after they put the red close sign on the door that I took down. And I put a cup of coffee and a bottle of beer. And I said, come and take it. And so that post has been seen by over 1 million people. And so when Skip came in, he said, hey, you gotta close. I'm like, I'm not closing, Skip. Skip goes, oh, I'm gonna call the police. So Skip goes out to his truck, calls the police. He thinks he's waiting on the police. And he proceeds to pull out and I'm not kidding here, guys, a baseball and a mitt. And literally, in our parking lot, play catch with himself. You have this bureaucrat that is closing down a man's business to the point where he is literally risking going to jail to keep it. I'm clearly not in the best position if that's what I'm willing to do. And he gleefully plays catch with himself in the parking lot. Because he doesn't really care. Of course, it's easy to think that way when we think I'm literally killing people. Which, I've heard our roasts are pretty good, so, maybe that's what it was. But so they put the close sign on the door and I kept operating anyways. And a line grew outside of our shop, our social media presence grew. We grew from we had like 1,000 likes on our Facebook page to around 14,000 in about 2 days. In that first month that we were fighting this fight, we reached individually over 1 million people with our social media pages. We still, as we continue to fight, because I know my stats, so listen up. We reach 20% of Kentucky voters with our Facebook page every month. We engage around 400,000 Kentuckians, individual Kentuckians, every month with our social media reach. That's just off of Facebook. We have other social media reaches as well, and we'll kind of go into building that and staying engaged there in a second. But more importantly, the reason why this became an important task is because we realized this wasn't going to be just a legal fight. This was going to be a PR battle. And about 2 days after we stayed open at the urging of the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, they filed a civil action against us asking for an injunction of our ability to operate, basically to close us. The reason why they had to do this, if you remember, they said they called the police. Well, apparently the police have responded saying, yeah, no, we don't want no part of what's going on over there. They knew that was a dumpster fire waiting to happen. They're like, you know what, I don't think the culture of Lexington, though lefty, would be okay with us arresting a guy for making a cup of coffee. Honestly, that's not what I signed up in the police force to do. When we found that out, in fact, we actually made a post on our Facebook about 2 days later that said we just found out that the Lexington Police Department refused to respond to the call from the health department to come out and close us. In other news, we're offering half off all coffee to first responders and police. The local news camped out in front of our coffee shop and reported several uniformed officers coming into our shop. And it was a part of the news cycle in Lexington for 24 hours that uniformed officers dared to visit Brewed while it was violating the governor's orders. Literally, at one point, there was a rule in the Lexington Police Department that you couldn't go to Brewed in uniform. Which made me feel more comfortable, so that way I knew if they were coming in. The first officer that walked in, I was like, now listen, I hope you're here to get coffee. Old Chip and Karen already tried. You're but one man. You're going to need a few more. But the media started really heavily following us, and this is one lesson too I think is really important for people in our fight. A lot of times you'll hear people say that they don't want to be involved with the quote-unquote mainstream media, right? Which is true, I see that. I remember once I was doing an interview where we were talking about a bill that had passed, and the courts in Kentucky had stopped it. I said something like, yeah, of course, we're heartbroken that didn't go through. And the headline's like, a day where Brewed owner heartbroken, and I'm like, come on. That was one of the only bad interviews I've ever given. But a lot of times we shut them off because you're like, they can't be trusted. They're going to spin the story. But one thing to pay attention to is the vast majority of Americans don't trust mainstream media to begin with, but they do watch it. And so don't be afraid to get your message out using mainstream media. Don't be afraid to engage with them just because you're afraid they're going to spin what you're doing. Because people don't trust them anyways. But they do get to hear about you. So the next few days continued. We have lines out the door as we're waiting for a court case. That same day that we are served with that civil case, the governor had weaponized the state ABC board, which, by the way, is the most useless organization on the planet. In Kentucky, the locales set their alcohol rules, and the locales set their own licensing requirements. And all the state does is rubber stamp it and then enforce the tyrannical three-tier system that states that though I have an alcohol license, I cannot go down to Walmart, buy a six-pack, and sell it on my shelves. I can only buy from distributors. That is a rule in Kentucky. So they took away our ABC license, and though I was pretty sure I could take on the health department, I didn't know if I could take on the ATF at that point. So we did stop selling alcohol, but that is we currently can sell alcohol, but there is a pending case involved. I'll talk about that in a second. But the civil case occurred, and the crux of our argument, as John was mentioning, was that at the time there was a lot of COVID hypocrisy. Outside of just you could go get a lap dance because that lap dance didn't serve alcohol. It was the 18 and up strip club. That was the key thing. And no, it did not go in. I want to be very clear. I love my wife. She's at the back. She would kill me. But the other thing that was left open was casinos. Not only is it especially egregious that casinos were left open when you consider the demographics that go and pull the slot, you consider the demographics that COVID seems to target, you see a lot of crossover. But also, it's especially egregious when you think about why. See, the state of Kentucky could not continue to survive financially if they closed down gambling. They couldn't afford it. They needed the tax revenue. So the state could make that decision in order for them to stay solvent, but I couldn't make the decision for my family to continue to operate so I could remain solvent. And that's especially egregious hypocrisy. So I did a video in the casino. I actually won $200 while I was there. Made a joke, I was like, man, I've been winning all week. We went down to the movie theater. You could buy popcorn, you go in the movies, you could sit down and eat it. But for whatever reason, they couldn't prepare food. So the movie, and this is so weird, the movie theater could sell a bag of popcorn, like sealed bag, like, Skin Pop or whatever. But they couldn't pop it themselves because COVID regulations. But there was an especially weird thing that said event venues could have 25 people in them and could eat inside. So the crux of the argument in front of Judge Travis in Lexington was, we're an event venue. We have events all the time. I have live music out there, I got trivia nights. I'm an event venue, I should be able to have the capacity of 25 people. And that really tripped up the judge. It really seemed like he was going to rule in our favor, especially when he asked the health department lawyer what's the thought process on this event venue versus restaurant thing? And the lawyer says, I don't know, I didn't write the order, I just enforce it. They didn't have a legal argument for it either. But the judge did rule that we had to close, but he gave Kentucky a gift. See, through our efforts on social media and mainstream media, and word began to spread, I met a man named Fernando. Fernando owned several restaurants in Louisville. And he came from Cuba when he was about 24 years old. And he came from Cuba after having been arrested twice for selling sandwiches. This story really rang through to him of what was going on. So he formed something called the Restaurant Rescue Coalition. And by working together, including with actually the Kentucky Restaurant Association, this is the most amount of fighting they ever did was sharing that post. We were able to get over 1,000 restaurant owners to sign on saying if the governor did not lift indoor dining by December 11th, that they were going to open anyways. And in our court case, in order to close us, the health department had to pay a bond. That bond was because they were asking for an emergency injunction. See, court cases actually take a long time. And if it turned out that we were in the right and they were in the wrong, we would have been held for damages because they wanted to shut us down so we couldn't operate anymore. So the health department had to post up a bond that if we were to win the case, long shot, we all knew, that they would have to give us that money as compensation for our lost revenues. It was a small bond in our case because we didn't realize it'd be important. At the time, we just threw out a wild number. If we bothered to actually back it up with, sales data, we probably could have gotten it higher. But it was about $5,000. Not a lot, but we were a pretty small operation. When you take some of these larger restaurants, and you start thinking you're going to have to pay a bond to close every single one because our justice system is built upon something called case law. And if there's already been case law established that says you have to pay a bond to close restaurants down for COVID-19 orders, and you have 1,000 restaurants that reopen up, the government literally could not afford to enforce their orders. 1,000 restaurants times probably the average bond would be about $25,000. And remember, budgets are already preset. You can't go tap somewhere else to pay those. And so that started painting Bashir into a corner, but he gave us another gift. See, his order only said we could not cook or prepare food. And as soon as they paid their bond, we did stop cooking and preparing food. We did. But the food truck outside kept operating. And it was real weird. It just pulled up out of nowhere. They're even so intelligent, such great business people, that realizing that they're in front of a coffee shop that no longer can sell coffee, they started just selling coffee. And they were even nice enough to hire my staff on board to help make that coffee. However, they forgot to bring cups. But I had cups. I was allowed to sell cups, so I sold cups. They were so embarrassed they didn't bring cups. They just started giving away free coffee. It was a weird situation. When people who are not experts in the industries are writing these mandates. I made an argument very early on that how can you say you're talking to the experts when it comes to closing down a restaurant if you're not pulling in a single restaurant owner to speak to? You're not. And of course, people would say, well, they're not epidemiologists. What do they know? Yeah, well, we also know what we currently do. For an example, anybody who owns a restaurant in here, I'm sure there's a few, knows that the CDC guidelines on washing hands are silly to even put out because we already do that. That's already what we have to follow. You don't need to make new guidelines. We already follow those guidelines. But because there's this big loophole, people could buy food off this food truck, buy coffee. They could then come inside of Brewed, sit down and eat and drink this food, coffee. It's still dine inside. So the health department calls up my lawyer and goes, hey, your guy has a food truck out front. My lawyer goes, that sounds like something he would do. And they're like, well, he can't do that. He's a restaurant. He goes, no, he's not. They're like, yeah, he's a restaurant. He's like, how can he be a restaurant? You took away his food license. See, apparently the legal definition between an event venue and a restaurant is a food license. And so they tried to hold us in contempt, but the judge actually ended up dismissing that and be like, no, they're not in contempt. They're following exactly what I told them to do. It's not my fault. You didn't properly write your orders. And so, because of the ongoing embarrassment, our governor was literally asked every day, why is Brewed still able to serve food and coffee and indoors? And he goes, well, they think they found a legal loophole, but we'll see how they handle those liabilities. That was what he said once. Which I'm still waiting to see what those liabilities are. Like, it was ominous for sure. So, in order to get us to stop, they had to give us back our food license. So I tried my feet. He's like, I don't know if I want my food license back. About 2 days before the order was set to expire, the same day Andy Bashir came out and announced he would not be renewing his indoor dining ban, the exact day that the Restaurant Rescue Coalition had demanded it to the exact demands that they had demanded, on what would be the record highest case count day in Kentucky, he announces he's reopening indoor dining. Now, if that was not because of our pressure, please tell me the science that says you reopen indoor dining on your record highest day. I haven't seen any. But I haven't seen a lot of science during this whole COVID situation to begin with. So we took back our food license. And that Friday, I stood on the Capitol grounds, and I told KSP, and I told the governor at the governor's mansion, I said, you know, on Sunday, we're going to do photos with Santa. Something that I guess one could maybe, if they were looking at it, construe as against the rules. And I said, you know, if you want to come arrest Santa Claus, come arrest Santa Claus. Because by golly, I do not want this man reelected. Who reelects a person that arrests Santa Claus? Who does this? He didn't arrest us, but we did do some good photos, which I realized how deep my hatred for children goes. I have a son. I like him. I don't like yours. I'm just warning you guys now. So a lot of people, after they get back their food license, we're still in a fight for our alcohol license, as I mentioned. And guys, I have to tell you, to be quite honest, unless some legislation happens in Kentucky, we will probably lose our alcohol license. That's okay. Sometimes when you're fighting these battles and wars, you will not come out unscathed. However, losing my alcohol license is a lot more preferable than losing my business and my livelihood and everything I've built for all together. It's worth it. But most people would say, okay, we're done, we're going to sit down. But that's not what we did. We have a business, we have resources that we've built up around this business. We've got a monetization strategy. But more importantly, everybody knows who we are, and you know, they tell you to keep business out of politics, but when politics comes for you, you don't really have a choice but to get politically heavily involved. So that's what we did. While waiting for the Kentucky state legislature to come into session, we traveled to a couple of states. We did some work in New Jersey and New York, helping set up private membership associations, much similar to what you guys have been talking about, but you can do it with the restaurants where they could set themselves up as a private member organization and be able to throw off a lot of COVID orders. You know, in Pennsylvania at one point we had around 2,000 restaurants ignoring COVID orders. You didn't hear about that in the news anymore. It's because people started looking at the playbook we were doing and realizing that covering these restaurants that were staying open was a bad idea. Because it actually gave us more ammunition, a better way to fight back. We went to Minnesota. We brought a unique brand there. We were there for, I believe about a few days after we left, after we did some work with actually a coffee shop there called the Interchange. A couple bars there. We were able to help one bar kind of was getting a mask violation, and we were able to help that attorney out by having gone through our own mask violations that we've had dismissed, and saying, well, you know, can they prove that none of those people had a medical exemption? Well, no, they can't. And so we were able to help them keep their license. But about a few days after we left, Governor Walz there, I believe, announced he'd be reopening indoor dining as well. So we started cutting videos there, saying, hey, you say your indoor dining's closed, and I open the door to a restaurant, and there's like 100 people in there and a live band. I'm like, I don't know, it doesn't feel very closed to me. Seems awfully open. And that pressure, see, politicians above all else don't want to be embarrassed. That's really key to understand. They don't like it. They don't like it when you go outside the governor's mansion and you drop off 2 bags of coffee with a note that says, no hard feelings, better luck next time. So we filed something in Kentucky. We don't have recall legislation, but we do have something called citizens impeachment, which is where citizens can file articles of impeachment on their constitutional officers and request that the legislator look at the orders, the crimes that they have, quote unquote, committed. And we filed that. Now, there is a statute that says the cost of filing that impeachment can be held against you. But we did it anyways. And we filed it. And that impeachment committee, what was set up as a kill committee, as the leadership of the Republican Party of Kentucky, kind of likes Beshear. They don't like him as a person. They think he's a jerk too. But he's good for business, right? He's a common enemy that can unite everybody against him raising years. So they want to keep him in so that impeachment committee actually found it violate our First Amendment rights knowingly by arresting people for going to church, which shouldn't come as a shock to anyone that that's a First Amendment violation. I mean, that's kind of clear. In America, you don't arrest people for going to church, no matter if there's a pandemic or not. They did find he broke the Constitution, and I'm quoting them here by saying, but a lot of the other prior governors of Kentucky had also broken the Constitution, and so if we hold him accountable for this, we might set a precedent that governors can't break the Constitution. I can tell you this much. Those establishment people who are behind that kind of thing, you know, they are right. I mean, if they do leave Beshear in, you know, more people will probably come over to the Republican Party in this case. However, they're wrong to think they're going to be there to experience it, because people are pissed off. Yeah. And they're especially upset when you see kind of what happened next. But we did have some successes. Before we started using our business and our platform to organize, to get legislation done, to schedule protests and demonstrations. We were able to help what would be a bill that gets held up in court that was to limit the governor's powers. But actually, as it passed the House, as HB 1 was kind of garbage. But we were able to help and get a key amendment passed on that made it an okay bill that would allow restaurants to operate, regardless of the governor's orders, as long as they had a plan. I'm not saying I was the one who wrote those words, I'm just saying that I was very heavily endorsing those words. We helped get past SB 8, a bill that ended the state's ability to force vaccination. Yay. We worked with Commonwealth education opportunities to help get what is education saving accounts, ESAs, passed. That's the first major step to getting school choice in Kentucky. We were able to stab a gas tax that would have raised taxes July 1st on gas by 40% in Kentucky and that had 13 co-sponsors. We were able to pressure that one into being stopped. In one day, on one educational bill, we were able to get 26,000 phone calls into the legislature. They did try to pass that cost bill on to us. That's what launched us working as well in the courts. Currently, we have a case pending called Cooperrider v. Bashir, which is a losing case for him, but he will not drop it because it's called Cooperrider v. Bashir. And I'm not saying we planned that out as the ultimate troll. But that would make the costing of the citizens' impeachment, which right now they have a cost bill over us of about $42,444.04. Now there's 3 impeachment people, which only left me with one question. How do we split 4 cents 3 ways? But we filed in court because obviously, in your First Amendment, you have the right to petition your government for redress. And I don't think charging you $42,000 for that right is very constitutional. More importantly, if that case is successful, it can push Kentucky from being into a citizen impeachment state to a more traditional recall state. Something I think that'd be very important when you take a state like Kentucky, with a governor like Bashir, and I think many of the things he did, such as arresting people from going to church, he wouldn't have done if he knew he could be recalled. I think that's an important step forward. On top of that, after the legislature left session, our governor, despite SB 8, which we had helped pass, decided to do a backdoor vaccine mandate. He had said he would not lift another one of our mandates until 2.5 million Kentuckians got vaccinated. Well, there's less than 2 million Kentuckians fully vaccinated, and 99% of our COVID mandates have been lifted. Why? Because we showed up and protested. He made that announcement 2 days later. Hundreds of people stood with me in the pouring rain outside the governor's mansion at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, protesting those actions. Then we showed up again 3-4 days later. Then we showed up again 2 weeks later. Then we showed up again 2 weeks later. Because that is one thing the left does much better than we do, is show up.
Amen.
And not let things die. We don't protest something one time. We're going to keep coming. Because it's important we push that Overton window as far as we can. Because politicians, not many of them are like Thomas Massey or Rand Paul, that will stand on their principles even when it's unpopular. If you remember, they stood up against a lot of these things when it was not a particularly popular thing to do. They follow the culture. Politics follows the culture. It's important that we push that Overton window and let people know that they are not alone. But I do have a few lessons that I learned that I want to tell you guys real quick, because I know I'm running out of time. How much time is that? 2 minutes. Oh, gosh, okay. Let me see what I can do here. Okay. All right, so we're not done yet. We have some key policy goals our company and our brand will push for, not just in our state, but nationwide. COVID was not the cause of this tyranny, but rather an amplifier of the mistakes that we've allowed government to get away with while we have been asleep at the wheel. Mistakes like allowing unelected bureaucratic bodies to set license fees or taxes, period, at all. Every tax raise, no matter how small, should be voted on. It should be voted on by a person who can be held accountable by the people they represent. Your license to do business should not be able to be taken away without a legal hearing. What I mean by that is currently we're in an ABC hearing. We did an administrative hearing. Even if the judge rules in our favor, the ABC can just take away our license anyways. It's a part of a process that they really don't have to follow. They can just take it away after the administrative hearing and say, no, never mind, we're just going to take it anyways. We need to cut unnecessary regulatory bodies. Like in Kentucky, the state ABC board, as I brought up. Health departments is a great example. Do you really think the hand washing sign is the reason why my staff wash their hands before making their sandwich? Do you really think the once every 6 months inspection that the health department does is why people don't leave my restaurant getting sick? No, it's because I want to remain in business. And if you throw up after leaving a place, you typically don't go back. We need to end taxpayer-funded lobbying of government organizations. For example, in the state of Kentucky, the health departments, over the last 18 months, have spent 3 times more money on lobbying than they have in the last 18 years. The school district my son goes to this year spent $60,000 on lobbying at the state level. Most of it to one person, one lobbying firm. We need to go ahead and make these changes permanent by starving them out. It's not enough to just say get rid of regulatory bodies, but we have to make sure that in general, we don't just cut taxes, but we eliminate them. Things like cutting the immoral taxes, like the income tax. They don't have the money coming in, they either have to make cuts or they got to make loans. Making loans is becoming increasingly less popular with the general voting base, however. What advice can I give you, though, in your fights? Do not get off social media. They will throttle you. They're throttling us right now because we live streamed a court case in Boone County, Kentucky, where experts, legally defined experts, were able to attack the COVID mandates and the efficacy of masks. This was in a legal hearing. This was approved by a judge for them to go up there and be experts in their field. And Facebook gave us strikes over it and throttled us for live streaming a court case. That's okay because we need, stay on social media. I'm telling you, stay on Facebook. It's not enough to just go retreat in your own holes because that's where people are that agree with you. And echo chambers are dangerous. Don't be afraid for your ideas to be in the open. After all, they're good ideas, right? So we should be able to broadcast them comfortably. No, they're going to throttle you, they're going to take you down, they're going to try to remove you, but constantly moving people over. Give you guys an example. Can everybody pull out their phones for me real quick? Thank you so much. Go ahead and in your phone there, go to your text messages. And go ahead and text the word liberty to 33777. It's going to ask you for your name. Go ahead and give us that. 33777. If we ever get kicked off Facebook, we have a database of phone numbers that we can text to tell them where to find us at. Share our information still on Facebook, even if we get kicked off. We have a Telegram. If you guys want to check that out, my wife at the back, we've got cards you can scan, it'll take you to Telegram. We've also started Project Uncancelable, where we're moving our own websites to our own servers. We got removed off credit card processing platforms, so we created our own. We got kicked off GoFundMe, so we created our own crowdfunding site. We got kicked off petition sites, so we created our own one of those too. It's freedomfight.us. Feel free to use that. freedomfight.us. Anywhere they try to remove us, we use technology to create a new opportunity. Don't be afraid of social media, use it. Don't be afraid of mainstream media, use it. Embrace the hate, understand algorithms. We have 3 anti-Brewed Facebook pages. That's right. 3. I feel special. Understand how algorithms work. Embrace the hate. Stop banning people off your pages. Engage them and let your followers engage them. Those commenting, those engagements drives your reach. It's key to understand your algorithms. Understand people want to help, they want to fight, but they need to know how to do it. Do not just tell people to call your legislator. Understand the legislative process and target one person. An example. In the state of Kentucky, we want to get a bill passed, but we can't get it into a committee. We go to the head of the committee on committees, which if it's in the House is the Speaker. And we target that one specific person with thousands of emails and calls. One person targeted by your base. Make it easy for them. Give them the name, the phone number. Like we do, we build out a portal that literally you just plug your email into, and once a week we're going to be sending an email to Andy Bashir telling him he sucks from your email address. Don't worry, Andy, we're changing up the email we're sending from every time too. Try to block that. Try to be a gateway to good ideas. I know a lot of us have sometimes some very extreme ideas. Recognize that if you're trying to win people over to your cause, start with something that makes a lot of sense, such as in New Jersey. When people were against the idea of liberty, we simply asked them if they really need somebody to pump their gas for them. New Jersey, legally, a gas attendant has to pump your gas because if you pump your own gas, people may die. It's a real regulation in New Jersey. Those simple ideas like that showing obvious government overreach is how you start to win people over. You don't need to dig down deep and go to your craziest ideas. You just simply find the most obvious, simple, outward examples of government overreach and push that. Show the obvious hypocrisy. It gets people angry and upset. That's how you win people over. But above all else, stick to your principles, even when it may not be popular. There are times where my followers want to do things like sue businesses for requiring face masks. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that because my entire fight has been about keeping government out of business. How dare I use those same forces to enforce my viewpoint on another business? Not only that, learn from the sins of our past. When you go to the government to regulate something you agree with or to enforce something you agree with, you're opening the door for them to enforce it the other way. You're inviting them in. Stop funding your own demise. Pay attention to the companies you're paying and you're doing business with. I'll give you an example. There's a brewery in Kentucky. The owner of that brewery, up until 3 or 4 months ago, was the state DNC chair for the state of Kentucky. Maybe you don't buy that beer. I know it's hard to not buy Coke. I like Coke too. But at the same time, we cannot keep funding our own demise with people that hate everything we stand for. Move to backups as soon as you can. And also, more importantly, like I had you guys just do, always be building your list up. That's very exciting and yet fearful to politicians. The fact that I can stand there and look a politician in the eye and tell them I have an email list of 50,000 is frightening and scary. Especially if 10,000 of them live in your district. That's pretty much all I have for you guys. If you like what we're doing, the fights we're doing, you can go to brewedco.com, brewedco.com. That's our website. You can buy our coffee online. You can buy our merch, of course, there too as well. We use brewedco.com, brewedco.com. We use the funds from that to fund these projects and fights forwards. I personally do not pull any money out of Brewed, my other company, as it will fire back up by staying open. Pays my bills, thankfully. But Brewed, on the other hand, is more of a financial vehicle for us to continue to fund these fights that we believe in. Thank you, guys.